You start to hear coyotes and bears and wolves, like you guys head home from the woods. And
mine was you start hearing gunshots or sirens coming.
so different time.
And which one did you gravitate towards, Duke?
There's one that's running away from me over in the corner chasing a butterfly. The other puppies are all following and jumping on me. I'm like, that one.
I feel like people that get into rescue, we get into rescue because it does heal a part of us.
All right. Diary of a Dog Rescue.
Hi, Duke.
Hey, Steph. Diary of a Dog Rescue, episode 2. So before we flash forward to Texas, Steph is now going to interview me.
Yeah.
So take it away.
All right. So
the
people want to know what Baby Duke was like. What was Baby Duke like? How did you get into rescue? What led you up into this point? Because I think it's a certain type of person that ends up, and really, I mean, I want to say like any nonprofit work, to be quite honest, but specifically rescue and animals. I think, you know, people have a different bond with animals. So I want to hear about what your childhood was like. I'm going to pretend I don't know any of this.
Yeah, fire away.
We're just meeting for the first time. So tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like and how animals played a role in that. Like your very first memory with your first, I'm going to say your very first dog.
Oh, man. Okay, so first off, we always had dogs growing up, whether it was multiple dogs in the house, one dog, typically German Shepherds. Those were big. The first dog we actually had, though, was Pyrenees, oddly enough, because it's a breed we've fallen in love with now.
Yeah.
But I was too young to remember her. The first dog I remember growing up was a male German Shepherd named Rocky. Really, really special dog. He's also the first dog, and one of my earliest childhood memories was him actually losing him, basically, towards the end and kind of that progression. But, I mean, as a whole, you know, I had my issues growing up.
Yeah.
You know, I had some trauma that led to some serious problems in my teenage years. But I can't complain about my childhood. You know, we never struggled financially. There was always food on the table. Right. I had 7 siblings. And 3 of us, Jackie, Clint, and I, were all just 1 year apart, which made growing up a lot of fun. Yeah. You know what I mean? We were all really close. We were always doing something together. And it was just a different time. So we'd be out of Montana.
A lot of time outside.
Yeah. You know, if we're in Montana, it's, hey, you know, when you start to hear coyotes and bears and wolves, like you guys head home from the woods. And
mine was you start hearing gunshots or sirens coming.
So different time. And you could imagine, you know, Jackie was 1 year in front of me. Clint was 1 year behind me. So we were it was a lot of fun growing up in that sense.
Yeah. But there was always a dog.
Always a dog. We had a cat for a really long time too. Yeah. My mom is the ultimate mom. To have 7 siblings, you could imagine, right?
Yeah.
And no, we're not Mormon. That always gets asked. But yeah, I mean, as a whole, you know, there's not much to complain about when you're talking about my childhood.
Yeah. So, I mean, you did say trauma though.
Yeah.
So what was going on then that, you know, instilled that kind of trauma in you?
I've touched on it a few times, and it's not a super comfortable topic.
Yeah.
But
it'll tell us.
It'll play.
Feel.
It'll play into, I think, a lot of this, because you will notice throughout the course of this podcast, I do have a hard time placing timelines on certain events as a young kid.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot that I've blocked out.
Right.
I was molested as a kid. And it's something, human brain's wild, right?
Right.
It's something that I blocked out for a really long time. You know, and I realized looking back at it once I did remember fully, and, you know, that all came back throughout even my teenage years. There's a lot of self-inflicted damage I did.
Yeah.
That, you know, as an adult, I realized was correlated with being molested as a kid.
Yeah. So let me ask you this though, before you continue. How old were you when that happened? Like roughly? Well, because then you said your brain kind of blocked out a lot of it. At what point, how old were you when you were like, oh man, no, like later on in high school?
Oh, when I realized?
Yeah. Was it high school? Was it teenage?
I was 18 years old. When
you were starting to remember things. Mm-hmm. So that whole time things were happening and you really weren't understanding why.
Yeah. And I mean, it was probably before 18 where there were weird memories, dreams, and just more suppression.
Yeah.
You know, and I developed a really bad eating disorder in high school. I was always a really withdrawn kid. I loved burying myself into books. I was bullied a little bit, which didn't help. Trying to find the YouTube safe word, right?
Right.
I was severely depressed and had serious thoughts of canceling myself.
Yeah.
If that's the correct word to use there. So my brain, I don't know, it found a way to
Protect itself.
protect me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But 18 was full blown understanding, remembering what happened and why it happened. So, I mean, a lot of negatives, obviously.
Right.
And it's tough, I think, for anyone, especially men, though, because it's not something you talk about.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's something that, even at 18, I remember a really brief conversation and then just moved on. It was one of those things like, okay, well, it almost felt embarrassing. You know what I mean? So there's a lot still. And, I found ways to cope.
Right.
And, I think the silver lining to it, it's definitely impacted me in a way that it's turned me into the man I am today, for sure. I think that's part of why I gravitate towards the dogs we gravitate towards. It's that feeling of helping something that is put in this helpless spot where they don't have a say in how their life has played out, and being able to help them, I think, heals me a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's the silver lining I try and focus on. And then teenage years, getting through that eating disorder, playing sports, getting into bodybuilding, tactical training later on. I think those things were impacted by that as well, because those were things that gave me control back.
Right.
Bodybuilding, tactical training, it made me feel strong, secure. There were very clear variables that I could control. So in a big part, again, not that it's a good thing, but the silver lining I choose to look at on it is it developed me to be this person.
Right.
And I'm very comfortable with who I am.
Well, it's very telling that you're able to even look at a silver lining in such an awful situation.
Yeah.
And it's very telling to you and who you are as a person. I think, having gone through something so terrible like that absolutely has shaped you into the person that you are today and the dogs that you gravitate towards. Because it's, like I said, I feel like people that get into rescue, we get into rescue because it does heal a part of us,
100%.
some part of us that's broken, or whatever verbiage you want to use. Making others feel whole again pieces a little part of us that was broken.
Yeah.
So I think rescue is a way of, as much as it beats us down and drains us at times, I wouldn't change anything about rescue. No. Okay. So at this point, you mentioned Rocky and that being like your first dog that you had.
His memories, period. Yeah.
It was Rocky.
Yeah.
And then you guys lost him.
Yeah. And I remember Rocky was one of those dogs, I say, come home when the wolves and bears and you start to hear stuff. Rocky was always with us.
Yeah.
I have some early memories up in Glacier, getting lost as a kid, wandering away from my parents and all the siblings. And Rocky's the one they found me with. He was just sticking with me.
Rocky, I'm sure, was like, are you guys like not
kids? I know.
Are you guys not paying attention to all of your children that you
But he was that kind of dog.
Yeah.
And at this point, obviously, I don't remember anything, but always very reserved kid.
Yeah.
This is probably shocking to you because I don't read much. We don't read at all. We don't have time. But I used to bury myself into books. I was never a kid.
I didn't even know you could read.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would finish novel type books in 3 days, get home from school.
Yeah.
And we talk about, having that dog there that doesn't judge you and is your friend. And I had a little closet area that my mom cut out for me.
Oh, little nook.
Yeah. Just read. But with Rocky, he got older, obviously. And, I remember going through that process of him not being the dog he was anymore. He was in a diaper at one point, which was really hard to watch. And I remember towards the end, the way our home property was set up in Montana was like 300-400 yards away from the home, past my mom's garden. There's a hill.
Yeah.
And the hill would slope off, and there was a tree that come out from the other side, had a nice little shady area. And I remember waking up in the morning, and I'd always go say hi to Rocky. And he was wandering over there a lot. So that whole week, I started following him. And
he's like, I want privacy.
He was so sick of me. Yeah, you understand dogs.
Yeah, now
when they start to go, especially shepherds, like they're prideful dogs. They want to go away.
Yeah.
and they want to leave away from their family. It's a pride thing with that breed. But I would follow him over, and we'd get to that spot, and he'd see me, and he'd turn my ass around, and we'd walk home.
Yeah.
And that went on for about a week. And I remember the last day, I got over there, and he put his head on my lap, and it was his way of kind of being like, "Hey, it's okay.
Yeah.
You stupid kid. This is what's going on." And he passed shortly after. So, in a lot of ways, I think going through that, watching a senior, a dog that you had at a young age grow into a senior dog,
Right.
losing, control of their bowel movements, incontinence, stuff like that, bad hips, just at a young age being exposed to that.
Right.
I think it stuck with me as kind of this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you don't realize as a kid, obviously. I mean, it wasn't until much later in my life where you start to look around. It's like, wait. It's like people just dump their dogs when they get old. Mm-hmm. Like they dump their dogs when they get bad hips, or they're high maintenance, or they
have to eat
are incontinent, or they have to eat soft food. You guys just get rid of your dogs. Like that's a thing. So I think that's part of why I gravitate towards senior dogs. We gravitate towards senior dogs.
Well, I think, you had those moments in rescue, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, whoa. This senior dog that you've had since it was a puppy is not going to live out your days with you. Mm-hmm. When we post some of these dogs on our personal pages, not the rescue page, like
people
just
are shocked.
People are like, "Oh, I can't believe this is happening." I'm like, there are like 100 other senior dogs at that same shelter.
Well, and that's why I love that we've taken our personal pages more serious, because however the algorithm set up on Instagram, the rescue page goes to people in rescue.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think people see Powerful Rescue and they associate rescue with this massive organization, not two people.
Yeah. Are you guys hiring? Let me know when the Powerful Rescue's hiring.
I think we've done a lot of good with our personal pages because it's
educating and we're spreading awareness.
It's more relatable. It's going to different audiences. And like for me, how it was when I started to realize that and got into rescue, that might, like the next Duke, the next Steph might be seeing something like that. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting to see people's reactions that don't understand that some of those dogs.
Yeah, mine was the same as a lot of yours.
Yep. No, it's sad. So So Rocky was your first experience to that.
Yeah.
So at this point, you're probably middle school, I'm assuming high school-ish. So what was the next dog that you had?
Oh, not even close to high school. It was another young Duke experience. Okay. Yeah. So I always say there's two dogs that I think really impacted early on the dogs I gravitate towards now, again, reflecting, looking back. The second was a female German Shepherd.
There it is.
And look, my dad always rescued our dogs, so credit to him there. And in part, Missoula, Montana, Alberton, Montana. We actually talked about a few Christmases ago when we went up for like 3-4 days and turn and burn, going to the shelter and rescuing a dog, bringing it home. And there was like 5 dogs at
there was like
shelter.
No.
Like everyone it's a good area. I know it's a rural area, and sometimes people have a bad association with that. Everyone kind of goes to the shelter, and it's not necessarily because they're educated in rescue. It's just like, why would I pay for a dog? Right. Like, I'm going to go to the shelter.
Or a dog shows up on your property, or
So he was always rescuing dogs from the shelter, right? His shortcoming, very irresponsible dog owner. My mom, on top of having 7 kids to juggle, also took care of all the dogs in every possible way. Yeah. He basically brought the dog home. Dog was, put on the house property. And it was my mom's job to get them vetted, to get them fixed, to feed them, to everything. So in that sense, intros and evaluating temperament, making sure the dog's a good fit was not a thought process.
A good fit with children.
And he got really lucky for a really long time. And then one day, I forget who it was, but it was the first time in a while we hadn't had a German Shepherd. We had a lab, Maggie, who was awesome. She passed when I was an adult, actually, like long-term dog. The day we brought her home, actually, he brought her home. We were out on the lake, and you talk about letting a dog decompress.
The first day that they had this dog.
The first day we're out on the lake, and Maggie is on a jet ski with me. And an adult driving the jet ski. Obviously, like, we have little pictures of her in like a life jacket.
It was the cutest picture I've ever seen.
That was her first day.
Like, all right, well, I guess this family.
She was a lab. Labs are pretty like, but we had Maggie at this point. He brings home a female German Shepherd who is dog aggressive.
Nice.
Yeah, and not real comfortable with kids either. Yeah. Like, objectively, a terrible fit.
Yeah.
So he gets out of the truck. I'm outside. Literally lets her out, walks inside. And it's like, oh, okay, cool.
So you're outside with both dogs.
So I'm outside. And again, I'm a kid. Like, I can't stress this enough. Like, I don't know exactly how old, but I'm a young kid. I'm not looking for alarms and body language and what's going on. You know, the dogs are stiff. I remember kind of circling, but I'm not really thinking. I'm just thinking, okay, it's kind of weird.
No.
So I'm inching closer and they go at it, and they go at it bad. To the point Maggie was sent to the emergency hospital. I can't remember if she spent a few days there. I think she did. Came home with drain tubes. Lucky she made it. Both dogs ended up being okay, but obviously could have gone very wrong. But even as a young kid, because I see how uncomfortable people are at dog fights. So on your interview, you mentioned you don't know if it's something you're born with or not. I don't know either, or if it's just adrenaline, even as a kid, or just being a stupid kid. My instinct was literally to get in the middle of it.
Right.
So you have full-blown German Shepherd lab going at it, and I'm a little kid, literally in the middle. I don't know how I didn't get mauled. Grabbing their collars for everything I could get. Gets to the point the female Shepherd has locked onto Maggie's neck. There's blood. And I just start punching. Like, just punching. I don't even know which dog. Trying to do something to get them apart. Nothing's working. I'm not strong enough as a little kid to break up two adult dogs going at it.
I mean, most adults aren't strong enough.
Yeah.
From the videos that we see on social media.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of blood just going at it. So eventually adults come outside. Dogs are separated. Maggie goes to the emergency hospital. Female German Shepherd is separated out, which, we talk about separating dogs from the start in slow intros. Yeah, it should have been done to start.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But dogs ended up being okay. And I remember just puking my brains out.
Just adrenaline going?
I don't know if it was adrenaline or if it was the actual physical feeling. I think it was more the feeling, because I could still remember it of punching a dog.
Like,
just a gross feeling. Even as a young kid, it's like the last thing you want to do, especially as a kid who loves dogs.
right.
Or anyone. You can
This
imagine having to
pain.
punch dogs. Like, I'm sick to my stomach. So that was rough. Yeah. But again, silver lining.
Yeah.
One of my favorite dogs to take in, Steph knows this, female German Shepherds and behavioral.
It's
female
not
German
it's
Shepherds.
not my favorite, guys, and it's not from a behavioral standpoint. Female German Shepherds tend to be a little loud. And when they bark, they're not just barking. They're barking at you. Yeah. It feels very personal. And it's high pitched.
Yeah.
I love female German Shepherds, but man, if we have multiples in the house, I could see the blood pressure. Oh no, I have earplugs in. Like, I just live in earplugs now.
But I think that situation, you're shaped in a lot of ways, I think, as a young kid by your environment, your upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there's two ways to look at that. One, you steer into it, or two, there's things, and it might not be all things, but some things where you're like, wow, I don't like how that was handled. I don't like this. I don't like that. Mm-hmm. And you steer the opposite way. So I think in some situations like that, I steered the opposite way. Like, hey, that was handled very poorly. Like, that wasn't the dog's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault, like, other than the humans there. I want to make sure that doesn't happen.
Well, I mean, like, you steered away, but kind of into it. Like,
well, I steered away from the way it was handled.
Correct.
I suppose. And, because somebody will ask, my mom found a home for the female shepherd.
Yeah.
It was, kind of a perfect fit. It was a neighbor, so we could keep a fairly close eye on what was going on. But again, my mom getting saddled with all the work. But
well, and I think too, to like give your dad some grace here, it's like back then it was the thing. There was like YouTube videos on how to train and integrate dogs. It was just like, look, they're dogs. They're going to figure it out.
Yeah. And it's his personality, and he got lucky with a lot of dogs. Yeah. And I don't condone, again, and we know this, I don't condone rehoming a dog. No. Like, again, my mom being slammed, 7 kids, other dogs. Rehoming for her was much better than at least dumping the dog at the shelter, euthanizing the dog.
Right.
Found a good home with no other dogs. Like, credit to her, because my mom likes dogs, but she's not like a dog nut.
Right.
So very kind heart, my mom, I guess, to even go that far, is someone that's not like in the rescue scene. Like, your average person isn't doing that.
I mean,
but
especially back then.
I will say, regardless, obviously, I don't like when people rehome dogs. You choose to bring a dog in your home.
Right.
You're making an adult decision to bring that dog in your home. That's why we do trial runs, to make sure those situations work. Right. Prior. So it was irresponsible, not the dog's fault. But that's a big part, I think, of why I love female German Shepherds and why I love rehabilitating behavioral cases or shut down shepherds that have been put in bad positions, because I take it personally.
Yeah.
That's something I want to fix.
Yeah.
So those are some of my favorite dogs. So those are the two dogs I think that really impacted the types of dogs that I gravitate towards the most now, at least as a young kid.
Yeah. And I don't think you realize that that's what was happening early on in
No,
rescue. I think you
it's a reflection years later.
Yeah, you started to connect the dots, like, after a few hundred dogs rescued, you're like, oh, well, that makes sense.
No, it's not something I ever thought about growing up or after. I mean, again, sign of the times, right? Every generation has their breeds that are dangerous. Stay away. All the adults around me was pits, right? Pits and rots. Like rots were junkyard dogs or used protection, especially in our
full transition.
Yeah. So it was, hey, stay away from rots, stay away from pits, lockjaw, blah, 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 blah.
So tell me what your first dog was. Your first dog as an adult?
Female shepherd rot mix who ended up having behavioral issues. Yeah. My first foster ended up being a pit too. Yeah. Again, kind of steering away like, man, they can't be that bad. Let's do it.
Right.
And I will say, rots are now my second favorite breed. Just absolute goofball, sweetheart dogs.
Yeah.
But yeah, my first dog, Thea, Rottie shepherd / lion mix.
Yes.
Best trained dog on the planet.
She's so pretty.
But she ended up having some serious behavioral issues, like human aggression in the home towards other people. And that was even prior to rescue me fixing that. But that was a feeling when we got through that. And you know how good Thea is. Like, she's a rock star. I mean, and I know everyone says that about their personal dogs. Thea is an actual rock star. Talk about like flawless recall, place, weight, flawless. But that was something that was so rewarding to have that, to end up with behavioral issues and to do what I like to fix it, to help her.
Right.
So that was awesome.
Well, I think, to kind of piggyback off of that and let people know, this wasn't a fix that happened overnight.
No.
Like, you and your ex at the time worked through that on a daily basis. You guys put in the time. I mean, she obviously went to training, but then it was what happened after training that turned Thea into the goodest girl ever, because it's not just
of like everyday follow-up between my ex, myself, work every day. Yeah. It's not this overnight fix. No.
Well, because I think a lot of people do reach out to us like, oh, my dog's reactive. What do I do? It's like,
and then you hear the timeline. Yeah.
And it's just working at it every single day. Yep. So, okay. So you have Thea, the goodest girl ever. Do you want to walk me through how you even acquired Thea?
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to touch on her personal situation because that's her life, her story. But a friend of mine growing up that I'd known for years, left home basically at a younger age, moved in with her boyfriend. And they both had unaltered dogs. So accidental litter. And we tell people in rescue now that you're older, most accidental litters aren't accidental litters. This I will say, just because I know
those two
in the situation they were in, it's young kids that I think genuinely had an accidental litter. Like they're thinking about other things and their dogs and move. Like it was different.
Right. And we say there are no accidental litters because when you have two unaltered dogs, animals are going to be animals. Instinct
as an adult, right? You should be smart enough. They were kids more or less, right? So anyway, out of high school, college baseball ended, moved to Idaho, just kind of to fill you guys in a little bit. I lived in Idaho for a few years because California was way too expensive. So I had, in La Mesa, California, I think it was like $3,500 for a studio or 1-bedroom apartment next to a train station with cops posted up all day. Moved to Idaho, find a job, and had a 3-bedroom home on a little creek for like $1,400, $1,250 a month.
That's kind of why we moved.
So I spent a couple years out there, worked long hours. I mean, my sole focus was saving up money. I didn't have a dog for the first time in my life, really, obviously, because I understood, and this is where people drive me nuts, bringing a dog in and then returning them because their work hours. Be smarter. I knew immediately it killed me not having a dog, but it was, my schedule would get as crazy as 4 a.m. to, I'm wrapping up at 11 p.m., kind of like our hours now. But personal training, then I had a management job. So I was juggling both. And then I started picking up different things on the weekend with clients and meal prep. My days were kind of like now 16-hour days busting through. But I saved up a lot of money, ended up finding a remote job. And at that point, my mom wants me back home. So have a remote job, saved up enough money to move back to California. So moving to California, she had reached out because she knew I was looking for a Rottie shepherd. She kind of knew that story.
Yeah.
So my ex and I swung by, and you have these
look at puppies,
shepherd Rottie mixed puppies running around, and they're all swarming us, and they're all up. And
which one did you gravitate towards, Duke?
There's one that's running away from me over in the corner chasing a butterfly at the end of their fence line. So I walk over and she runs away and she's like giving me teeth, wants nothing to do with me. The other puppies are all following me and jumping on me. I'm like, that one. I want that one. So they get them inside. Again, all the puppies mauling my ex, mauling myself, and Thea is hiding under the couch, hiding under the coffee table, screaming, doesn't want to go.
So wait, let me ask you this, because in my love story with Bruce, I fell in love with another puppy that was there, and my ex fell in love with Bruce, and I was like, well, we're here because he wants the dog.
Yeah.
Did your ex fall in love with another dog, or was she like, this? No,
I don't think so. I think she knew it was my call.
Okay.
And she's a big dog person too.
Okay.
So that steered, like, that was a pro.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Obviously.
Yeah. So no, I mean, it wasn't, I don't think, any other dog at that point. I was the one that, like, I like the feisty female German Shepherd.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the cutest little fluff ball too. So yeah, I get Thea back, and that was that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, similar to how we got our cats when Steph got me cats. I wanted Ron, the one that was not adoption ready yet and feisty.
Yeah, Ron wasn't even out with all of the other kittens.
No.
She was like, oh, I'm not even going to bring him out. He's antisocial. He's, he doesn't like to be handled. He is going to claw you.
I want to see him.
Like, bring him out immediately, please.
Yeah, and he's named Ron after what?
After Parks and Rec.
Ron and Tammy.
Ron and Tammy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're hilarious.
Tammy.
But yeah, Ron was a disaster. He clawed the hell out of us. He ripped your pants, ripped my shirt. And he was like itty bitty. He was like 8 weeks old.
He's a little terror. Yeah.
But now he's a sweetheart.
Yeah.
He's super lovable now.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we? So now we have Thea.
Yeah. So Thea, we get a little bit out of the year.
Yeah.
That was really tough, obviously. But she lives with my ex and her boyfriend. She has a great life.
Yeah. It is nice when we get her.
I love when we get her. It's like split custody. Same thing. But, great life. They only have one other shepherd.
Yeah.
And they get along great. They're both massive dog people. It's, the majority of the year, again, one of those tough things. But when you have 30 to 40 dogs and you're running a rescue and a routine.
Yeah, we get it.
It's the best thing. And Thea's the love of my life.
I'm second.
Yeah, Steph.
We know that.
She knows that. But Thea's a mama's girl too.
Yeah,
that was another big thing. Like, one of the very few female dogs that
gravitated towards.
Yeah, because typically it's like Bruce. He gravitated towards you being a male. That's the rule of thumb.
Right.
But I love when we get Thea. Yeah,
it is really special.
So
now we are back in California. You have Thea. How did you even get into or discovering rescue at this point?
So it was a blind senior pity.
Okay.
Completely blind, that popped up at an OC animal shelter and was rescue only. And I had no idea what rescue only meant. So I dove into
I'm surprised you just didn't file for 501c3
the way I am.
Rescue, yeah.
What is rescue only? Dive down that rabbit hole. And then I'm looking for rescues, trying to get somebody to pull this blind senior pity for me.
Fun.
And no disrespect to OC.
Yeah.
And I've seen over the years, there's more rescues in OC now.
Well, I think there's a lot of rescues that have pull rights in different places.
And have moved up because things have gotten so bad.
Right.
Yeah. At the time, there was a lot of breed-specific rescues. I mean, to be honest, there were parts of OC, early on fostering. I had, skip forward a little bit just for the story, Amber, who was a tripod senior pity with cancer. And she looked how I'm describing her.
Right.
Right. And there was two times walking around my neighborhood, one with an older guy that had a fit. Make sure you got that pity on a tight leash. Don't let her anywhere near us. I literally laughed at the guy and I gave him a little jab. But no, again, OC, not totally hating on everyone in OC. Just, it's a little bit of a softer environment, and pits, rots. I mean, there was another time I went to the dog park and there was a group of moms that clearly just got back from yoga, like with all of their purebred dogs. And they literally walked up, saw me and Thea, asked me what breed Thea was. I said, oh, she's a shepherd rot mix. And they go, oh, a mix. And they left. I swear to God. It was the most uncomfortable. I was just like, what? And there was one other single dude in there, and he had a little pitty cattle dog mix. Oh, it was the next day. I'm sorry. Late. Because I was there late because I was like, I'm not going to show up with these chicks.
These people now.
And I sit down with Thea. Again, we don't do dog parks now, but I sit down with Thea. It's just me and him. And he goes, you met the yoga moms, huh? I was like, yeah.
Like, oh, this is the outcast hour. Welcome.
Yeah. I was like, dude, so anyway, not a lot of rescues at the time in OC that we're doing senior dogs, pity, stuff like that. So this dog's there for months. Eventually does get pulled, but at this point I'm irritated.
Yeah.
Like, damn it. So I knew who Steph was through fitness. And I had seen she had started a rescue. I know. I had seen she had started a rescue, but being in LA, I wasn't sure how that would work from a foster standpoint, a pull standpoint. It's not that far of a drive with traffic. It could be a pain in the ass. I understand at this point, rescues work with certain vets, so that drive commute. But after the pity, I'm just pissed.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I'm going to start following and I'm going to reach out when I see that next dog. So the first one was Abigail, who was overbred mama. She ended up being terminal, but I reached out. Steph politely basically said, like, she's not going to make it, kid.
Yeah.
And she ended up making it through surgery, but passing away the second day in the hospital.
Yeah.
So that was tough. And then, I stayed on it. At one point, I tried to adopt Helen, but I couldn't get everyone on board with it. I joke a lot with Helen. That's the real reason had Steph fall in love with me and tricked her so I could get Helen. In the end, I win.
Right. Helen was a tough case. She still has separation anxiety, and I was like, I can't. That's why I ended up keeping her. Yeah. Is just because of how amped up she gets. Yeah. And I was like, this dog is going to end up in the wrong hands or be returned. I'm just going to end up keeping
Objectively,
her.
It was the right move.
Right.
In hindsight, as a rescue.
Yeah. But. So we kept in touch after Abigail when you reached out. Abigail.
Well, because at this point, I know, like, oh, she's open to a foster in OC. So I can start following because Steph was pulling dogs that I gravitated towards. Right. And there weren't a lot of rescues that were. That's obviously a big part of why Steph and I work so well, not just personally, but in the rescue sense. Because it's those kinds of dogs. It's the dogs that we feel truly need the most rescuing, and they're not always easy adoptions. Sometimes they live out their days with us, but I gravitated towards that early on.
Right.
So flash forward.
Yeah. So at this point, I was at the shelter. I was at South LA Animal Shelter. I hear a man sobbing in the lobby. Turn around. There's this cute, tiny little pitty with a massive double ear infection. And he just wants to get her seen by a vet, but he can't at the shelter unless he surrenders her over. Right. So I spoke to him and I said, hey, look, where are you currently staying? He said he had an RV parked in the back of the shelter, basically. Mm-hmm. And I said, I can come back tomorrow, pick her up. Here's my contact information. If you trust me, I will get her taken care of and I will bring her back to you. And unfortunately, after getting her seen by a vet, she was basically allergic to everything under the sun. So we had to get her healed first. And he understood that.
We went over this. Yeah. If you guys missed, we'll
kind of fast forward this.
We'll fast forward through this segment with Nova and Amber, just because it is on the first podcast. Right. So you guys aren't getting repetitive stuff.
Right. So, we placed Nova with Duke for a little bit. Yeah. Then she went back to the owner.
Steph and I had a fight.
We had a little bit of a disagreement because Duke didn't understand that Dick. So he didn't understand at that point that, like, look, this dog was not surrendered over to our rescue. Yeah. We stepped in to help. So she went back. Then we realized it wasn't a good fit. He surrendered her back over to us. And now Nova lives a happy-go-lucky life, and
the best.
She's
with Matt and Aaron, who actually they run lifestyle. Yeah, they run Rise HRT, the only company we're sponsored with. Awesome people. But I guess our first meet, from my perspective, no, not at all. Same thing. It was just very comfortable with Steph. So I remember Steph showing up with Nova. We went through the pack walk intro process. But that was the one constant, and it's in hindsight. I didn't realize it at the time, but always very comfortable to be around Steph.
Yeah, it was just easy to talk to.
I'm not someone that gets uncomfortable around people, but I don't particularly like interacting. I mean, it does feel a little bit like I've gotten better at it in rescue.
Right.
But it was just easy. It was always very easy. That's the one thing that stuck out to me that's remained the same. But that was really it. Outside of that, I mean, it was with Nova. short interactions, picking up meds, vet appointments, very like to the point,
Right.
which I actually liked. And we've learned in rescue, Jess with Hoso, shout out to her. That's how rescue is. Jess will show up, if we're doing a transport or road trip with like snacks.
Yeah.
Or energy drinks. And she's not somebody that's going to talk her ear off for 45 minutes. She understands everyone's in a rush and rescue. It's hi, bye, love you guys. Here's your stuff. Have fun.
Yep.
Cut the kiddos. Bye. Yeah. And that's how it was with Steph. It's just easy. Like, cool. Got it. Yep. I'll be there. Yep. These are the meds. Cool. I know how to read instructions. Great. Yep. So that was Nova. And we went over her on your interview. Amber, we went over on your interview. I guess the one thing we didn't go over, and we see a lot with people that take in their first hospice dogs, was there was a point where I remember sending Steph a picture of where her cancer was. And I don't know what you were even thinking to my response, but I remember sending like, hey, I think she's getting better. Like, we've had a really good few days. We just went on our longest walk. And
at this point, I knew what was happening.
The high before they tank. I didn't. I was convinced in my head that Amber was going to somehow have a miracle. Right. And pull through. And Steph was in a nice way supportive, but also trying to help me be realistic.
Just realize that this was bone cancer that has spread. So if she starts to feel like, starts to decline, let me know immediately. I'm so glad that she's having good days. But just if she's having, lack of appetite or throwing up or anything like that, just call me immediately. We'll get her into, the soonest appointment or the emergency room at this point.
Well, and we could insert a few clips. Amber, I would walk. We had 3 walks every single day, morning, afternoon, night. We'd go to the same spot.
Yeah.
But at night, there was a little park in my neighborhood, and we would go because it was empty. We'd go late because I was playing baseball at the time and at a training facility. So very structured. I had my day job, obviously, dogs. And then I coached Little League, also training at a facility. By the time I wrapped up my day plus the gym, I'd get home at like 10, 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So our last walk was around 11 p.m. We'd get to this park like 11:30, and we'd sit on the bench until almost midnight. Just sit on the bench. It was a view of LA, or not LA, OC, but it was traffic, but it was pretty. Yeah. Like over a hill in Mission Viejo, and we just sit there. So, I mean, it was a strong bond with Amber for sure. Yeah. And I think I just worked up in my head that she can't leave. Like she'd go to baseball with me. We did everything. She'd drive around in the car with me. So that was tough. But I remember, and we talk about it a lot with the hospice dogs we take in, when it's something that's terminal, it's better to be a couple days early than a day too late. Yep. And that's a mistake I've made once, and I'll never make it again, because I feel like I let Amber down in that sense. Because I worked up in my head, and I think I put myself before her. You know what I mean? But
not in a selfish way.
No.
I think you were thinking, okay, she's having some really good days. Right. I want to keep these good days going.
But I think it's a little delusional. You know what I mean? It's tough. That's why we're very hands-on with hospice fosters. We don't have many. We've only had a few people do it, but very hands-on where it's daily check-ins, so we're able to assess exactly what's going on. Right. Because it's easy, not in a selfish way, but just to kind of delude yourself into what I was thinking. So sure enough, woke up one morning and projectile vomiting, trying to hide behind a bush in the backyard. And I called Steph, like barely holding it together. Ripped over to the hospital. I had to stop once on the side of the freeway, I remember, because she was throwing up. Like, just awful flipping last day. Yeah. So that was tough. But it definitely switched something in me. And we've touched on this before. Hospice fostering is not for everyone. It's really hard. Right. It's going to break you either way, but it either breaks you and you realize you have to do this and you have to go save the next one and give them that, care in the end, or it breaks you and you're like, man, I want nothing to do with this ever again.
Like, I cannot handle this again.
And I was the latter. I wanted to keep doing it. So, turning point, and I think tying into obviously the first experiences I had with senior dogs, that was Amber. Yeah. So after that, Liam, obviously we touched on your interview. So I guess, where do you want to go? You want to go to,
well, I think the question that someone asked on the Q&A, that I guess we could just piggyback off of that a little bit, was who fell first? Just to give people some timeline.
I fell first, just by a couple hours, really. So So
When did it happen for you?
So at this point, Steph was using me as an errand boy, basically.
He basically said to me, I asked him, well, what is it that you want to do in rescue? Because he voiced that he wanted to start a rescue.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, look, I can show you, the basics. And
I mean, it got to the point I was dropping off puppy pads and picking up medication.
It was busy work. It was shit I didn't want to do.
I should have backlogged you for gas money.
It was all the things I didn't want to do. I was like, yeah, sure. This is really important work.
Yeah.
I need an assistant.
I was dropping off potty pads or something. And then I was going to pick her brain, on rescue, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she sent me a text. It was like, hey, I'm so sorry, I got to cancel. I've been trying to get these 2 dogs picked up. And I was like, hey, just send me your address.
He was like, I'll come help.
Or your PIN location. So we find these 2 dogs. I meet up with her. They run into a cemetery.
Fun.
Yeah, so I fell in love with Steph.
This is literally like the 3rd time this has happened to me, by the way.
Oh, I know. It was one of them was a terrible story, but we can get into that one.
Yeah, we won't talk about that actually ever.
I don't. Those 2 huskies.
Yeah, one was a German Shepherd, but this is that cemetery is massive.
Yeah, somebody's got to be putting food out there. I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know, but yeah.
So anyway, get into the cemetery. Are tracking these dogs for probably a couple hours.
Probably 2 hours.
It was massive. Yeah, 2 hours. And we end up getting one of them pretty close. The other one doesn't come.
We're just hanging out at this point.
It can be tricky. Yeah, you're just trying to share space, build an initial relationship. The next time you see them, they're a little more comfortable.
Right.
But we go to the front to leave, and of course, we end up getting locked in.
It was like 8 p.m. and I guess they closed the gates at 7.
Yep.
And that's why I mentioned that the cemetery is huge, because even the security guard that was driving around didn't even notice that there was a car parked.
Or didn't care.
That there was a car parked in the cemetery.
I know.
Like how did you close up? Yeah, there was 2. I mean, obviously we drove separately. There was 2 cars in the cemetery somewhere, and you didn't make your rounds enough to whatever. So he locked us in. So we get to the front and the gate's locked.
We're able to get a hold of somebody.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'll be there soon. It's like, great. So this is really the first time Steph and I just talked about unrescue related stuff.
Yeah.
And it was some rescue related stuff, but obviously different situation. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, wow, we're locked in a cemetery and we got to kill about an hour. Like, okay.
Well, and I think at this point, for context too, we never talked about personal stuff. So I had no idea that Duke had separated from his ex, and he had no idea that I was going through a divorce.
No.
So we hadn't talked about personal stuff. Our social medias weren't,
you were bigger, but it was fitness.
Yeah, it was fitness related. I didn't like spew my guts out on social media, so no one knew what was going on.
I had like 8 social media posts up. It was not my thing.
Random things.
Yeah.
So at this point, for context
purposes. Funny because it had been a while too, but yeah, it was just rescue oriented all the time. Like we weren't close friends,
right? Like
that I would talk about with that. You know what I mean? Anyway, but yeah, just talking about personal stuff, and that didn't even come up in the cemetery until later. But the one thing that stands out outside of just being comfortable with you was it felt like we were really close,
right? Physically close.
And I've told you this. You're not supposed to know though, as an interviewer.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
What do you mean by physically
breaking
close?
Development? No, I remember I was leaning up against my car, and Steph was probably leaning up against her car, or 10 feet away. But it felt like she was from me to the mic. It felt like we were physically very close that entire hour or whatever it was we were waiting.
Yeah.
And it was just an odd feeling that I've never felt. And I remember when the gate guard showed up, it was this very abrupt reality check.
Like, hey, idiot, I'm actually 10 feet away.
Back to this other kind of world or reality.
Yeah.
And it felt bad going back to that. And that was the first thing for me where I realized I didn't want to go back to that other reality.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a couple hours before, I guess.
Hours? It wasn't that night. It was
next day.
No.
You always mess this up. It was the next day.
I'm gonna go look at
receipts. Ask Naya.
Okay.
Ask Naya. Naya's with me. It was the next day. It was the next day at Puppy Palace.
Okay. Well, at this point,
anyway,
I had completely separated from my ex. I'm living with a friend of mine, and
Naya can check the receipts.
Naya can check. So I'm living with a friend of mine, and Duke's gonna come over. We had puppies in a garage or something, and he's gonna come help with the puppies. And Naya's like, I'm gonna order dinner. Do you guys want anything? And Naya, set up this whole little.
I didn't know there was dinner. I showed up and there was dinner, and I was like, sweet.
Yeah. And then Naya went to bed. And it was just Duke and I, and we were talking, and then I like started feeling like butterflies. And I was like, all right, is this just me? Like, am I just a weirdo? Do you feel different? Because if you do, great. Like if you don't, I will totally shut this off. Like this is not happening. Because at this point, again, we didn't want anything. Like we were not looking for a relationship at all. And I was like, I just have to get this off my chest. Like, are you feeling anything? And he's like, oh, thank God. And then, yeah, the rest is history, basically.
Yeah, it was all Naya.
it was Naya setting up dinner and whiskey.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, the timeline up until we met. And
yeah, after we voiced it, I guess it escalated very quickly.
It escalated quickly, but in a extended sense, because it was really weird. I remember after we voiced it, there was a week or couple week period where it was back to business as usual. It was almost odd because getting out of serious relationships, we didn't want to be in a relationship.
Hell no.
And it was also, for me at least, this kind of wait out period of like, out of a relationship. Is this real? Is this weird?
Right.
So it was a weird period of back to business after that conversation. And then I think once things felt cemented, they moved really quick.
Yeah.
Obviously, moving to Texas with a stranger and starting an animal sanctuary. So we get to Texas, load up 6 dogs at the time.
Yeah.
And we'll dive into, like I said on the last one, those individual dogs and kind of where the rescue started and everything after that in Texas on the next episode. But I think that's all there is to cover on
Baby Duke
interview. Yeah.
Baby Duke interview. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Duke.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate
your time.
And yeah, I guess we'll catch you on the next episode.
Yeah.
We'll learn more about your time here in Texas.
No, it's our dynamic now. Yeah, all together. No more 2 perspectives. That's it's too hard to go back. So we'll just collectively, since we are one now. But no, I mean, getting to Texas initially, it was stressful. Not just with the dogs, new state, new home, but from a relationship standpoint, it was stressful on Steph and I. Yeah. Rescue is very stressful on your relationship, but a new relationship where you're supposed to be in this honeymoon phase, we didn't really get that. We were stressed.
What are you talking about? It's still honeymoon stage, my love.
No, I mean, it's tough, especially because Steph didn't have a remote job yet then.
Yeah.
So Steph was in the office. And I mean, at the time, 6, 7, 8 dogs was a lot. Again, you adapt, you put yourself in situations, but, it was a lot on my end. Going from having 1 or 2 foster dogs to having 8 dogs I'm responsible for. There was a lot of maintenance on the property I was doing because, it's a 3-bedroom home not made for 8 dogs and rotating and separating with neighbors and HOA and cap limits. And it was tough. I think
we were like ninjas with those dogs.
Yeah, we were. But it was tough, not from a resentful standpoint.
Yeah.
But it was hard, moving to Texas, starting this rescue. And, obviously you can't just find a remote job.
Right.
That's not something that works. And, we both have to make a living and make income. And there were times it felt slow for sure. Where we want to rescue and we want to help these dogs and we're just not in a position to. So, I do think that first year was frustrating for both of us.
Yeah. Well, obviously being in a new environment too, where we didn't have fosters and friends.
We learned really quick. I will say LA, from a foster standpoint, and it's probably like being in Austin or Dallas if we were in a city. Right. Like big cities, typically it's a younger demographic. And they're in more positions to foster. When you're an established family, you have kids, resident dogs, it's more difficult to bring a new dog in.
Right.
When it's a younger demographic, I think people are more willing to foster because they don't have a resident dog. Younger demographics also typically have these weird hours or work remote because it's different jobs. So finding fosters was impossible. I mean, I think we had 2.
Yeah.
We were doing trips to California and back every 2 months to check on fosters because we were still having fosters out there because we couldn't find anyone, or transporting dogs because we didn't have pull rights set up. It was definitely stressful. Yeah. But we obviously worked through it and it'll be fun to talk about.
Yeah. So that will be on the next episode.
That's a wrap on episode 1. Your hair is tied up on that thing the whole episode.
This plant's gotta go, guys. Plant's gotta go. It looks cute, but it keeps on grabbing my hair and I feel like something's in there. So till next time.
Don't forget, share, comment, subscribe, and
ring the bell, please.
later, guys.
Bye.